The letter was crumpled and stained with dirt when Xavier pulled it from beneath his boot heel, wondering how long it had been lying in the dusty street of Sweetwater, Texas, waiting for someone to care enough to read it. The year was 1882, and Nathan had just finished delivering a herd of cattle to the rail yard on the edge of town. His hands were raw, his throat was parched, and all he wanted was a whiskey and a bed, but something about the careful script visible through the grime made him pause. He unfolded the paper carefully, squinting against the late afternoon sun. The words were written in a woman's hand, delicate but firm, and as his eyes moved across the page, his heart began to beat faster. To whoever finds this, I am writing because I have no one else to tell. My name is Beatrice Holloway, and I am 23 years old. I live in Westcliff, Colorado, where my father runs a trading post. He is a good man, but he does not understand that my heart feels things he cannot see. 3 days ago, a man came through town. We spoke for only an hour while he watered his horses, but in that hour, I felt something I have never felt before. It was as though my soul recognized his, as though we had known each other in some other lifetime. I know this sounds like the foolish, romantic notions of a girl, but I am not a girl. I am a woman who has spent her whole life being practical, helping my father, keeping the books, managing the store. I have never let myself dream of anything beyond duty. But when I looked into this stranger's eyes, I saw a future I did not know I wanted. He left before I could find the courage to speak. He rode south, and I do not even know his name. I am writing this down because if I do not tell someone, I will burst. If you are reading this, stranger, know that love exists, even if only for an hour, even if it never comes to anything. I felt it, and that means it was real. Nathan read the letter 3 times, standing there in the street while people moved around him, going about their business. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, and something in his chest ached with a loneliness he had not allowed himself to acknowledge in years. He was 26 years old, and he had spent the last 8 years working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, sleeping under stars, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. His parents had died of fever when he was 18, and his younger sister had gone to live with their aunt in St. Louis. He sent her money when he could, but they rarely wrote. He had convinced himself that this life of solitude was what he wanted, that he was not made for settling down, for softness, for love. But this letter, written by a woman named Beatrice who lived in Westcliff, Colorado, made him feel something he could not name. It was not desire exactly, though he found himself wondering what she looked like. It was more like recognition, as though her words had reached across the distance and touched something in him that had been sleeping. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. Then he walked to the saloon, ordered that whiskey, and sat in the corner thinking. The bartender, a grizzled man named Pete, noticed Nathan's distraction. "You look like a man with something on his mind." Nathan pulled out the letter and handed it to him. "Found this in the street." "You ever heard of Westcliff, Colorado?" Pete read the letter slowly, his eyebrows rising. When he finished, he handed it back. "Westcliff is about 200 miles north of here, up in the mountains. Pretty country from what I hear." "Why, I do not know," Nathan said honestly. "But I feel like I need to go there." "You are going to ride 200 miles because of a letter written by a woman you have never met?" Pete shook his head. "That is either the bravest thing I have ever heard or the stupidest." "Maybe both," Nathan said. He drained his whiskey and stood. "I need to buy a fresh horse and some supplies." The next morning, Nathan set out before dawn, riding a strong bay mare he had purchased from the livery. His saddlebags were packed with jerky, hardtack, coffee, and ammunition. The letter was still in his pocket, and every so often he would touch it, just to make sure it was real. The journey north took him through some of the most beautiful country he had ever seen. The flat plains of Texas gave way to rolling hills, and then to the foothills of the mountains. The air grew cooler, cleaner, and at night the stars seemed close enough to touch. He thought about Beatrice as he rode, wondering what had possessed him to undertake this journey. He did not even know if she was the kind of woman he would be attracted to, or if she would want anything to do with him. For all he knew, she had already forgotten about the stranger who had passed through her town, but something in her words had resonated with him. The idea that a soul could recognize another soul, that love could happen in an instant, that it was real even if it never came to anything. He had spent so many years telling himself that he did not need anyone, that he was fine on his own, but the truth was that he was lonely. He was tired of waking up in different places, tired of having no one to talk to except his horse, tired of pretending that this life was enough. On the third day, he stopped at a small settlement to rest and water his horse. There was a general store, a blacksmith, and a few houses. An old woman was sitting on the porch of the store, shelling peas into a basket. "Excuse me, madam," Nathan said, tipping his hat. "I am heading to Westcliff, Colorado. Am I on the right path?" The woman looked him up and down. "Westcliff is another 2 days north if the weather holds." "What business do you have there?" Nathan hesitated. "I am looking for someone." "A woman," he nodded. The old woman smiled. "You have that look about you, like a man on a mission. Well, I hope you find what you are looking for, son." "Thank you, madam." He bought some bread and cheese from the store and then continued north. The mountains were closer now, their peaks still dusted with snow even though it was late spring. The trail grew steeper and the air grew thinner. His mare was strong, but he had to stop more often to let her rest. On the 5th day, he crested a ridge and saw Westcliff spread out in the valley below. It was a small town, maybe 50 buildings clustered around a main street, with a river running along the eastern edge. The mountains rose up behind it, majestic and imposing, their slopes covered in pine trees. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten. He rode down into the valley, feeling suddenly nervous. What was he going to say when he found Beatrice? "Hello, I found your letter in a town 200 miles away, and I rode all this way because I felt something when I read it." She would think he was insane, but he had come this far. He could not turn back now. The main street of Westcliff was busy with afternoon traffic. There were wagons hauling goods, men on horseback, women with baskets of groceries. Nathan tied his mare to a hitching post outside a saloon and stood for a moment, taking it all in. He needed to find the trading post, but first he needed to wash the dust off his face and gather his courage. Inside the saloon, the bartender was a young man with a friendly face. Nathan ordered a beer and asked, "Do you know where I can find the Holloway trading post?" The bartender nodded. "Sure, it is just down the street, about 3 buildings on the left. Big sign out front. You doing business with old man Holloway?" "Something like that," Nathan said. He drank his beer slowly, trying to calm his nerves. Then he paid, thanked the bartender, and walked back out into the sunlight. His boots echoed on the wooden boardwalk as he made his way down the street. When he saw the sign for Holloway's trading post, he stopped and took a deep breath. The store was well kept, with large windows displaying goods ranging from tools to fabrics. A bell jingled as he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit after the brightness of the street, and it smelled like leather and spices and wood. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything a person might need in a frontier town. Behind the counter stood a man in his 50s with graying hair and a weathered face. He looked up as Nathan entered. "Good afternoon. What can I do for you?" Nathan cleared his throat. Are you Mr. Holloway? I am, and you are. My name is Nathan Xavier. I am looking for someone. A woman named Beatrice Holloway. The man's expression grew cautious. That is my daughter. What do you want with her? Nathan pulled the letter from his pocket and held it out. I found this in Sweetwater, Texas, 5 days ago. I think it belongs to her. Mr. Holloway took the letter and read it, his face softening as he recognized his daughter's handwriting. When he finished, he looked up at Nathan with a mixture of surprise and confusion. You rode 200 miles to return a letter. Yes, sir. Why? Nathan struggled to find the words. Because when I read it, I felt something. I do not know how to explain it, but it was like she was speaking directly to me. I know that probably sounds foolish, but I could not stop thinking about it, about her. I had to come. Mr. Holloway studied him for a long moment. Then he called toward the back of the store, Beatrice, come out here, please. There was a rustling sound, and then a young woman emerged from the back room. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. She was not conventionally beautiful in the way of the saloon girls or the fancy ladies in the cities, but there was something about her that made his heart skip. She had dark hair pinned up in a simple bun, intelligent brown eyes, and a serious expression that softened when she saw her father holding the letter. What is that? She asked. This young man found it in Texas, Mr. Holloway said. He rode 200 miles to bring it to you. Beatrice looked at Nathan, and in that moment, he saw recognition flash in her eyes. Not because she knew him, but because she understood what he had done and why. She took the letter from her father's hands and stared at it, her cheeks flushing. I do not understand, she said quietly. I dropped this weeks ago. I thought it was lost forever. It was in the dust, Nathan said. I almost did not pick it up, but something made me, and when I read it, I knew I had to find you. Beatrice looked up at him, and for a moment they just stared at each other. There was something in her gaze that made him feel like she was looking right into his soul, seeing all the loneliness and longing he had been carrying for so long. Why? She whispered. Because I feel it too, he said. The words hung in the air between them, and Nathan felt his heart pounding so hard he was sure they could both hear it. He had no idea what would happen next, but he knew he had done the right thing by coming here. Mr. Holloway cleared his throat. Well, this is certainly unexpected. Beatrice, why do you not show Mr. Xavier around town while I mind the store? You two clearly have things to discuss. Beatrice nodded slowly, still looking at Nathan. Yes, that would be good. They walked out of the store together, and as soon as they were outside, Beatrice turned to him. I cannot believe you came all this way. I wrote that letter in a moment of weakness. I never thought anyone would read it, let alone act on it. I am glad I did, Nathan said. I know this must seem strange, but I have been thinking about what you wrote for 5 days straight. About how you felt something real, even if it was only for an hour. I have spent my whole life running from that kind of feeling, telling myself I did not need it, but reading your words made me realize how wrong I was. They walked toward the river, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the ground. Beatrice was quiet for a moment, and then she said, The man I wrote about in that letter, the stranger who passed through town. I built him up in my mind as something more than he was. I realize that now. But the feeling I described, that was real. I have never felt anything like it before or since. What did he look like? Nathan asked, curious. Beatrice smiled slightly. I do not remember, honestly. I remember his eyes were kind and he had a nice voice, but beyond that, the details have faded. It was not really about him, I think. It was about the possibility of connection, of finding someone who understood me. I have lived in this town my whole life, and I love it, but sometimes I feel like no one really sees me. They see the shopkeeper's daughter, the woman who keeps the books and helps with inventory. They do not see the person underneath who wants more, who dreams of things beyond this. "What do you dream of?" Nathan asked. Beatrice looked at him, and there was vulnerability in her eyes. "I dream of being seen, of being known, of finding someone who does not need me to be anything other than myself." Nathan felt something shift inside him. "I think I understand that better than you know." They reached the river and stood at the edge, watching the water flow past. It was peaceful here, with the mountains rising in the distance and the sound of birds singing in the trees. Nathan felt a sense of calm he had not experienced in years. "Tell me about yourself," Beatrice said. "Where are you from? What do you do?" Nathan told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents, about the years he had spent working cattle drives. He told her about his sister in St. Louis, about the loneliness that had become so much a part of his life that he had stopped noticing it. Beatrice listened without interrupting, her eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, she said, "It sounds like you have been running for a long time." "I have," he admitted, "but I think I might be ready to stop." They talked until the sun began to set, and then Beatrice said they should head back before her father started to worry. As they walked back through town, Nathan felt a sense of rightness he could not explain. It was as though everything that had happened in his life had been leading him to this moment, to this place, to this woman. When they reached the trading post, Mr. Holloway was locking up for the evening. He looked at them with a knowing smile. "I trust you two had a good talk." "We did," Beatrice said. "Mr. Xavier, where are you staying tonight?" Mr. Holloway asked. "I had not thought that far ahead," Nathan admitted. "I suppose I will find a boarding house." "Nonsense," Mr. Holloway said. "We have a spare room above the store. You are welcome to stay there." "It is the least we can do after you rode all this way." Nathan was surprised by the offer, but grateful. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that." They went inside, and Mr. Holloway led him up a narrow staircase to a small but clean room with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. "Make yourself comfortable," he said. "We will have supper in an hour." After Mr. Holloway left, Nathan washed his face and hands, then sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. He had found Beatrice, and she was everything he had hoped for and more. But now what? He could not just stay in Westcliff indefinitely. He had no job here, no money to speak of beyond what was in his saddlebags, and yet the thought of leaving made his chest tighten. Supper was a simple meal of stew and bread, eaten at a small table in the Holloway's living quarters behind the store. Mr. Holloway asked Nathan about his journey, and Nathan answered as best he could, still feeling slightly overwhelmed by the day's events. Beatrice was quieter, but every so often Nathan would catch her looking at him, and their eyes would meet, and he would feel that same jolt of connection. After supper, Mr. Holloway excused himself to do some bookkeeping, leaving Nathan and Beatrice alone. They sat in the small parlor, the fire crackling in the hearth, and for a while they did not speak. Finally, Beatrice said, "What are you going to do now? You cannot have come all this way without a plan." "Honestly, I did not have a plan," Nathan said. "I just knew I had to find you. But now that I am here, I realize I do not want to leave, not yet anyway." "Then stay," Beatrice said simply. "Find work here, see what happens." Nathan looked at her, his heart racing. "Is that what you want?" "Yes," she said. "I think it is." The next morning, Nathan went out looking for work. Westcliff was a growing town, and there were opportunities for someone willing to work hard. He found a job at the livery stable, mucking out stalls and caring for horses. It was not glamorous work, but it was honest, and it paid enough for him to rent a small room in a boarding house. Over the next few weeks, Nathan and Beatrice spent every spare moment together. They would walk along the river, talking about their dreams and fears. They would sit on the porch of the trading post in the evenings, watching the sun set behind the mountains. They would help each other with their work, Nathan carrying heavy crates for Beatrice, Beatrice mending his shirts when they tore. Slowly, tentatively, they fell in love. It was not the instant, overwhelming passion that Beatrice had described in her letter, but something deeper and more enduring. It was the love that came from truly knowing someone, from seeing their flaws and strengths and choosing them anyway. One evening, about 2 months after Nathan had arrived in Westcliff, they were sitting by the river again, this time with a blanket spread out on the grass. The air was warm and the sky was painted in shades of pink and gold. Nathan had been working up the courage all day to say what was on his mind. "Beatrice," he said, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, her expression open and trusting. "What is it?" "When I read your letter, I felt something I had never felt before. It was like you had reached into my chest and touched my heart. And every day since I met you, that feeling has only grown stronger. I love you. I know it has only been 2 months, and maybe that is too soon to say something like this, but I cannot keep it inside any longer. I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have loved you since the day you walked into the store. I did not know it was possible to feel this way, but you have shown me that it is." Nathan cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, and it was like coming home. It was like every lonely night under the stars, every empty morning, every moment of wondering if he would ever find his place in the world had all been leading to this. When they finally pulled apart, Beatrice laughed, a sound of pure joy. "We should tell my father." Mr. Holloway was sitting at the table in the living quarters, going over the day's receipts when they came in. He looked up and saw their faces, and he smiled. "I take it you two have something to tell me." "I want to marry your daughter, sir," Nathan said, "if you will give me your blessing." Mr. Holloway stood and clapped Nathan on the shoulder. "You have my blessing, son. I knew from the moment you walked into this store that you were different. Any man who would ride 200 miles for a letter is a man worth keeping around." They were married a month later, in a small ceremony at the church in Westcliff. The whole town turned out to celebrate, and it was one of the happiest days of Nathan's life. Beatrice wore a simple white dress, and she looked more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, he felt like the luckiest man alive. After the wedding, Nathan moved into the Holloways' living quarters, and he began working full-time at the trading post alongside Beatrice and her father. He discovered that he had a knack for dealing with customers and managing inventory, and Mr. Holloway was pleased to have the extra help. The business thrived, and Nathan felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. But life was not without its challenges. That first winter was harsh, with heavy snows that made travel difficult and supply lines unreliable. There were days when the store had almost no customers, and Nathan worried about whether they would have enough money to make it through. But Beatrice was resourceful and optimistic, and together they found ways to make ends meet. One evening in the middle of winter, when the snow was piled high outside and the wind was howling, Nathan and Beatrice sat by the fire in their small bedroom, wrapped in blankets. Beatrice had been quieter than usual all day, and Nathan could tell something was on her mind. "What is it?" he asked gently. Beatrice looked at him, and there was a mixture of joy and nervousness in her eyes. "I am pregnant," she said. Nathan felt his heart swell with emotion. "Truly?" She nodded. "The baby will come in late summer if everything goes well." Nathan pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with happiness. "We are going to be parents," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I cannot believe it. Are you happy?" Beatrice asked. "I am more than happy," he said. "I am grateful. For you, for this life, for everything." The months that followed were filled with anticipation. Beatrice's belly grew round, and Nathan found himself constantly marveling at the miracle of it. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick, and it would fill him with a sense of wonder. Mr. Holloway was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a grandfather, and he began building a cradle in his spare time, carving intricate designs into the wood. In late August, on a warm afternoon when the sky was clear and blue, Beatrice went into labor. Nathan was terrified, pacing back and forth in the parlor while the midwife attended to Beatrice in the bedroom. Mr. Holloway sat calmly in his chair reading, but Nathan could see the tension in his shoulders. After what felt like an eternity, Nathan heard a baby cry and his heart leapt. The midwife came out smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy boy. Your wife wants to see you." Nathan rushed into the bedroom and found Beatrice propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. Nathan approached slowly, almost reverently, and when Beatrice pulled back the blanket to reveal the baby's face, he felt tears spring to his eyes. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "You want to hold him?" Beatrice asked. Nathan nodded and carefully took the baby into his arms. The weight of him, the warmth, the tiny fingers that curled around Nathan's thumb, it was almost too much. He had never imagined he could feel this much love for someone he had just met. "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked. Nathan thought for a moment. "What about Thomas, after my father?" Beatrice smiled. "Thomas Xavier, I like it." Thomas was a happy baby with a loud cry and a hearty appetite. Nathan found himself completely enchanted by fatherhood. He would wake up in the middle of the night to help Beatrice with feedings, and he would spend hours just watching Thomas sleep, marveling at the tiny person they had created. As Thomas grew, so did their family. 2 years later, Beatrice gave birth to a daughter they named Clara, and 2 years after that, another son named Benjamin. The house above the trading post was crowded but full of love and laughter. Nathan could not believe how much his life had changed since that day he found Beatrice's letter in the dust. Mr. Holloway, now a doting grandfather, doted on the children. He would tell them stories about the old days, teach them to count using the goods in the store, and carve them little wooden toys. Nathan was grateful for his help, especially as the trading post continued to grow and require more of his and Beatrice's time. One evening when Thomas was 5, Clara was 3, and Benjamin was just learning to walk, Nathan and Beatrice were sitting on the porch after the children had gone to bed. The stars were out and the air was cool and crisp. Nathan reached over and took Beatrice's hand. "Do you ever regret writing that letter?" he asked. Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "Why would I regret it?" "I do not know," Nathan said. "I just wonder sometimes if you ever wish your life had turned out differently. If you had married someone from Westcliff, someone you had known for years instead of a stranger who showed up out of nowhere." Beatrice squeezed his hand. "Nathan, that letter was the best thing I ever did. I did not know it at the time, but I was writing it for you. I was calling out into the universe, and you answered. You rode 200 miles to find me, and you have given me a life more beautiful than I ever dreamed possible. I have never regretted it for a single moment." Nathan felt emotion well up in his chest. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Beatrice said. "Always." They sat there for a while longer hand in hand, watching the stars and listening to the sounds of the night. Nathan thought about that day in Sweetwater when he had found the letter, how his life had been so empty and aimless. And now, just a few years later, he had a wife he adored, 3 beautiful children, a thriving business, and a place to call home. It was more than he had ever hoped for, but life had one more surprise in store for them. When Benjamin was 2 years old, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder on her than the previous ones, and Nathan worried constantly. But Beatrice was strong, and she assured him that everything would be fine. In the spring, she gave birth to another daughter whom they named Rose. Rose was a tiny, delicate baby, and for the first few weeks, Nathan was terrified that something would happen to her. But she proved to be tougher than she looked, and soon she was thriving, her little personality beginning to shine through. With 4 children, the living quarters above the trading post were bursting at the seams. Nathan and Mr. Holloway decided to build an addition onto the back of the building, creating more space for the growing family. It took months of hard work, but eventually they had a proper house with enough bedrooms for everyone. As the children grew, Nathan taught them everything he knew. He taught Thomas how to ride and care for horses, how to track and hunt, how to be honest and work hard. He taught Clara to be strong and independent, to never let anyone tell her she could not do something because she was a girl. He taught Benjamin to be kind and thoughtful, to look out for those who were weaker than himself. And he taught Rose, when she was old enough, to be brave and curious, to explore the world around her with wonder. Beatrice taught them to read and write, to do arithmetic, to appreciate the beauty in everyday things. She taught them to be compassionate, to help those in need, to always tell the truth. Together, Nathan and Beatrice raised their children with love and discipline, and they watched with pride as they grew into remarkable young people. Mr. Holloway lived to see all 4 of his grandchildren grow into their teenage years. He passed away peacefully in his sleep one winter night, at the age of 72. His death was a blow to the whole family, but especially to Beatrice, who had been close to her father her entire life. Nathan held her as she grieved, and he made sure the children understood what a wonderful man their grandfather had been. After Mr. Holloway's death, Nathan took over running the trading post entirely. It had grown significantly over the years, and now employed several people from the town. Nathan was respected in Westcliff, known as a fair and honest businessman, a devoted husband and father, and a man of his word. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Beatrice with a trip. They left the children in the care of a trusted friend and traveled to Denver for a week. It was the first time they had been alone together in years, and it felt like a second honeymoon. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at restaurants, went to the theater, and spent long hours just talking and enjoying each other's company. One evening, as they were walking through the city, Beatrice said, "Do you ever think about that letter, about how improbable all of this is?" "All the time," Nathan said. "Sometimes I still cannot believe I found it, that I had the courage to come looking for you." "What do you think would have happened if you had not found it?" Beatrice asked. Nathan shook his head. "I do not like to think about that. I was so lost back then. I think I would have just kept drifting, working cattle drives until I was too old to sit a horse, dying alone somewhere with no one to mourn me." Beatrice shuddered. "I am so glad you found it. I am so glad you came." "So am I," Nathan said. He stopped walking and turned to face her. "You saved me, Beatrice. You gave me a reason to stop running, a reason to build a life. I owe you everything." Beatrice reached up and touched his face. "We saved each other," she said. "That letter was me reaching out, hoping someone would hear, and you heard me. You answered. We were meant to find each other." They kissed there on the street, not caring who saw, lost in the love that had sustained them for 20 years. When they returned to Westcliff, they found that Thomas, now 19, had done an excellent job managing the store in their absence. He had inherited his mother's head for numbers and his father's way with people, and Nathan realized that his son was ready to take on more responsibility. Over the next few years, Nathan began grooming Thomas to eventually take over the business. Clara, at 17, had become a skilled seamstress and was considering opening her own dress shop. Benjamin, at 15, loved working with wood like his grandfather had and was apprenticing with the town carpenter. And Rose, at 13, was still figuring out her path, but she was bright and curious, and Nathan had no doubt she would find her way. As Nathan approached 50, he sometimes felt the aches and pains of a life spent working hard, but he had no regrets. He would look at his family gathered around the dinner table, laughing and talking, and he would feel a sense of completeness that he had never known was possible. One day, Thomas came to him and said, "Father, I want to ask Sarah Mitchell to marry me, but I wanted your permission first." Sarah was the daughter of the town doctor, a sweet and intelligent young woman whom Thomas had been courting for over a year. Nathan liked her very much. "You have my permission," Nathan said, "but more importantly, does she love you?" Thomas grinned. "I think so, I hope so." "Then ask her," Nathan said. "Do not waste time. Life is too short." Thomas proposed that evening and Sarah said yes. They were married that fall, and Nathan stood beside his son as his best man, feeling a profound sense of pride. The cycle was continuing, a new generation beginning their own love story. Clara married a young lawyer from Denver 2 years later, and they moved to the city, though they visited often. Benjamin married a local girl and set up his carpentry shop on the edge of town. And Rose, defying everyone's expectations, decided to become a teacher, and she took a position at the schoolhouse in Westcliff. As Nathan entered his 60s, he and Beatrice began to slow down. Thomas had taken over most of the day-to-day operations of the trading post, though Nathan still came in to help whenever he could. They spent more time sitting on the porch, watching the world go by, reminiscing about the years that had passed. One warm summer evening, when the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, Nathan and Beatrice were sitting in their favorite spot, holding hands. They had done this so many times over the years that it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Do you remember the first time we sat together by the river?" Beatrice asked. "Of course," Nathan said. "It was the day I told you I loved you. You were so nervous," Beatrice said, smiling. "I could see your hands shaking." "I was terrified," Nathan admitted. "I had no idea if you felt the same way." "I did," Beatrice said. "I think I knew from the moment you walked into the store with that letter. I knew you were the one I had been waiting for." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Nathan said, "I want you to know that these years with you have been the best of my life. I was nothing before I met you. I was just a man wandering, looking for something I could not name. And then I found your letter and I found you, and suddenly everything made sense." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder. "We were lucky," she said. "So many people never find what we found." "I know," Nathan said, "and I am grateful every single day." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the world in gold, Nathan thought about that day in Sweetwater when he had almost walked past the letter in the dust. What would have happened if he had not picked it up? If he had not had the courage to ride 200 miles to find the woman who wrote it? His entire life would have been different. He would have missed out on the greatest love he had ever known, on the family they had built together, on the home they had created. But he had picked it up. He had read it, and he had ridden 200 miles to say, "I feel it too." And that had made all the difference. Thomas and Sarah had 3 children of their own, and Nathan loved being a grandfather. He would tell them stories about the old days, about how he had found their grandmother through a letter, about the long journey that had brought him to Westcliff. The children would listen with wide eyes, captivated by the romance of it all. Clara and her husband had 2 children, and they would visit from Denver several times a year. Benjamin and his wife had 4 children, keeping them very busy. And Rose, though she never married, was a beloved teacher in Westcliff, shaping the minds of the next generation. On Nathan and Beatrice's 40th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. The house was full of children and grandchildren, laughter and noise, and Nathan stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed with gratitude. He had gone from being a lonely cowboy with nothing to his name to a man surrounded by love and family. During the celebration, Thomas stood up and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, "to my parents who taught me what true love looks like. My father always tells the story of how he rode 200 miles to find my mother after reading a letter she had written. It is a story of courage and faith and the power of love." And looking at them now, 40 years later, still holding hands, still looking at each other like they did when they first met, I know that their love is real. It is enduring. It is the kind of love we should all aspire to. So here is to Nathan and Beatrice Xavier, the best parents and grandparents we could ever ask for. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered, and Nathan felt his eyes fill with tears. Beatrice squeezed his hand and he looked at her, this woman who had changed his entire life, and he mouthed the words, "I love you." She mouthed them back, and in that moment, surrounded by their family, Nathan felt a sense of peace and contentment that he had never known was possible. As the years went on, Nathan and Beatrice grew older together, their hair turning silver, their steps growing slower. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by the decades they had spent together, by the challenges they had overcome, by the life they had built. Nathan still kept the letter, now yellowed and fragile with age, in a wooden box on his dresser. Sometimes he would take it out and read it, marveling at the words that had changed his life. Beatrice would laugh when she saw him doing this, saying he was sentimental, but he knew she loved it. One afternoon, when Nathan was 72 years old, he and Beatrice were sitting on the porch as usual. The mountains were beautiful in the distance, and the air was warm and sweet. Nathan felt a twinge in his chest, a reminder that his body was not as strong as it once was, but he ignored it. He was too content to worry about such things. "You have any regrets?" Beatrice asked suddenly. Nathan thought about it for a moment. "No," he said, "I do not. I have lived a good life. I have loved and been loved. I have raised children who have become good people. I have built something that will last beyond me. What more could a man ask for?" "I feel the same way," Beatrice said. "I used to worry that I would live my whole life without ever really living, if that makes sense. That I would just go through the motions, doing what was expected of me, never taking a risk or following my heart. But then you came along and everything changed." "I am glad I picked up that letter," Nathan said. "So am I," Beatrice said. "So am I." They sat there for a long time, holding hands, watching the world go by. Nathan felt a deep sense of gratitude for every moment, every breath, every heartbeat. He had been given a gift and he had not wasted it. Nathan lived to see his 75th birthday, surrounded by his children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. It was a joyous occasion, filled with laughter and stories and love. But a few months later, on a quiet autumn morning, Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Beatrice holding his hand. The funeral was attended by nearly everyone in Westcliff. Nathan had been a beloved figure in the town, known for his kindness, his integrity, and his devotion to his family. As they lowered his casket into the ground, Beatrice stood strong, though her heart was breaking. She knew that Nathan would want her to be strong, to continue living, to find joy in the family they had created together. In the months that followed, Beatrice found comfort in her children and grandchildren. They visited often, making sure she was never alone for too long. She continued to live in the house she and Nathan had built, surrounded by memories of their life together. One day, about a year after Nathan's death, Beatrice was going through some of his things when she came across the wooden box on the dresser. She opened it and found the letter, the one she had written so many years ago. She read it, tears streaming down her face, remembering the young woman she had been, lonely and longing for something more. And she thought about Nathan, the cowboy who had found her letter in the dust and ridden 200 miles to say, "I feel it too." He had given her everything, a life full of love, a family, a home. He had seen her, truly seen her in a way no one else ever had. And she had loved him with all her heart, every single day, until his last. Beatrice lived for several more years, surrounded by the love of her family. She told the story of how she and Nathan had met to anyone who would listen, wanting to preserve the memory of their love. And when she finally passed away, at the age of 84, she was buried beside Nathan, their graves marked with a simple stone that read, "Nathan Xavier and Beatrice Holloway Xavier together in life. Together in eternity love endures." Their story became a legend in Westcliff, passed down through generations. The trading post, now run by Thomas and eventually his children, remained a fixture in the town. And the letter, carefully preserved, was kept in a glass case in the store, a reminder that love can find you in the most unexpected ways, that sometimes all it takes is the courage to reach out and the willingness to answer. Years later, one of Nathan and Beatrice's great-grandchildren, a young woman named Emma, was standing in the store looking at the letter. She was 18 years old and feeling lost, unsure of what she wanted to do with her life. Her grandmother, Clara's daughter, came up beside her. "Do you know the story of that letter?" she asked. "I have heard it," Emma said. "But tell me again." And so her grandmother told her the story of Beatrice, who wrote a letter in a moment of vulnerability, and Nathan, who found it and rode 200 miles to find her. She told her about the love they had shared, the life they had built, the family they had raised. "The point is," her grandmother said, "sometimes you have to take a risk. Sometimes you have to put your heart out there, even if you are scared. Because you never know who might find it, who might answer." Emma looked at the letter, at the faded words written by her great-great-grandmother so long ago, and she felt something stir inside her, a sense of possibility, of hope. "Thank you," she said. "I needed to hear that." As Emma left the store and walked out into the bright Colorado sunshine, she thought about the legacy of love that Nathan and Beatrice had left behind. It was not just in the family they had created, but in the example they had set, in the proof that love was real, that it was worth fighting for, that it could change everything. And somewhere, perhaps watching from beyond, Nathan and Beatrice smiled, knowing that their love story would continue to inspire long after they were gone. They had found each other against all odds, and they had built a life that was beautiful and full and true. It had all started with a letter in the dust, a cowboy brave enough to pick it up, and two hearts that recognized each other across the distance. And that was enough. That was everything. The trading post stood for many more decades, a testament to the Xavier family and their enduring legacy in Westcliff. Thomas ran it until he was too old, then passed it to his eldest son, who passed it to his. Each generation added their own touches, but they always kept the letter in its glass case, always told the story of Nathan and Beatrice to anyone who asked. The town of Westcliff grew and changed over the years, but some things remained constant. The mountains still rose majestically in the distance. The river still flowed along the eastern edge, and the memory of a love story that had begun with a simple letter endured. In time, the house that Nathan and Beatrice had built became a gathering place for the family. Every year, on the anniversary of their wedding, The entire family would come together there. They would share a meal, tell stories, remember the couple who had started it all. The children who had never met Nathan and Beatrice would hear about them and feel connected to something larger than themselves. The values that Nathan and Beatrice had instilled in their children, honesty, hard work, compassion, love, were passed down through the generations. Their descendants became teachers and shopkeepers, carpenters and doctors, lawyers and ranchers. But no matter what path they chose, they carried with them the knowledge that they came from a love that was true and deep and lasting. And sometimes, when the family gathered, someone would take out the letter and read it aloud. The words, though faded, still had the power to move people to tears. To whoever finds this, I am writing because I have no one else to tell. The story of Nathan and Beatrice became more than just a family legend. It became a reminder that in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, love was possible. That sometimes the most important thing you could do was to be brave enough to express what was in your heart and to answer when someone else did the same. Nathan had been a cowboy with nothing to his name when he found that letter. He could have ignored it, walked past it, forgotten about it. But he had not. He had read it, and he had felt something, and he had been brave enough to act on that feeling. And Beatrice had been a woman who felt unseen, who had poured her heart onto a page, never expecting anyone to read it. But someone had, and he had ridden 200 miles to find her. Their story was proof that sometimes the most extraordinary things could come from the smallest moments. That a piece of paper in the dust could change the course of two lives, could create a family, could build a legacy that lasted for generations. As the years turned into decades, and the decades turned into a century, the story of Nathan and Beatrice remained alive. New generations heard it and were inspired by it. Young people facing their own uncertainties and fears would think of the cowboy who rode 200 miles for love, and they would find the courage to take their own risks. The letter itself, though fragile and yellowed, was carefully preserved. The family considered it their most precious heirloom, more valuable than any amount of money or property. It was a tangible reminder of where they had come from, of the love that had made their existence possible. And so the story lived on, passed from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild, a testament to the enduring power of love, courage, and the willingness to say, "I feel it too." In the end, Nathan and Beatrice's love story was not just about two people who found each other. It was about what happened when someone was brave enough to speak their truth, and when someone else was brave enough to listen. It was about the ripple effects of a single act of courage, how it could touch lives for generations. It was a story about hope, about the possibility of connection in a world that could feel isolating and cold. It was a reminder that we are not alone, that somewhere out there, someone might be feeling exactly what we are feeling, waiting for us to reach out. Nathan had found Beatrice's letter in the dust and rode 200 miles to say, "I feel it too." And in doing so, he had not just found love. He had found his home, his purpose, his reason for being, and that was the greatest gift of all. The sun set over Westcliff once more, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. The Xavier family trading post closed for the day, the letter still in its place of honor. And somewhere, the spirits of Nathan and Beatrice watched over the town they had loved, the family they had created, content in the knowledge that their love had mattered, that it had changed the world in ways both big and small. Their love had been real. It had been true. And it had endured, just as they had promised each other on that day by the river so many years ago, always, forever, through all the days that were and all the days yet to come.